give you a little background about our presenter today. I work closely with Eytan here in the same office at the Forest Guild. And Eytan joined the Guild before I did in 2005 and served as Community Forestry Coordinator and Model Forest Program Manager for a number of years. He's recently been promoted to Southwest Region Director. Prior to working for the Forest Guild, Eytan worked for the National Park Service and Cottonwood Gulch Foundation. Eytan's background is he's got a Bachelor's of Arts from Rutgers in Anthropology and a Master's in Environmental Studies from University of Pennsylvania. And I think in many ways what he'll be talking about today is sort of a capstone for some of the work he's been doing in New Mexico for a number of years. And so it's a real pleasure to be able to hear about this, what I view as a very successful effort to advance restoration here in New Mexico. So with that, I'll go ahead and try to mute the line here. Eytan, we should still be able to hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. And I will go ahead and give you the floor, and we should be all set to go, so you can take it away.
Okay, thanks, Xander. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking time to join this webinar. So, like Xander said, I have more of a forestry background than a fire background, but I hope to tell a story right now of how through collaboration, leveraging and partnerships, a group of stakeholders were able to return fire to frequent fire ponderosa pine and dry mixed conifer forests, and also use this controlled burn to build capacity for future burning using the Nature Conservancy's Training Exchange Model, or TREX. Jeremy Bailey, who manages that program for the Nature Conservancy, presented to the Southwest Fire Science Consortium last month about the national program. So I'm going to talk about how the Forest Guild replicated that in New Mexico this past fall. So I should note that this was the first controlled burn for the Forest Guild. The Guild is a nonprofit. We're 30 years old, and we're a national organization of professional foresters and allied resource professionals who are centered on ecologically, socially, and economically sustainable forest management, and a type of management that benefits both ecosystems and communities dependent upon them. Many of our members use fire in their management around the country, but until now the organization hasn't led a controlled burn. So just quickly want to talk about where I'm headed with this talk. So I'm going to try to give some context for the site and the project, and then quickly move ahead to talk about the findings from the after-action review. And everyone in fire on the phone probably knows that an after-action review is a regular process at the end of events to capture what you did well, what you could do better, and what you learned. And hopefully those things from this project will have benefits to other folks trying to do similar work. So I have to talk about the Collaborative Forest Restoration Program, since they funded to a large extent this project. The Collaborative Forest Restoration Program, or CFRP, is specific to New Mexico and is run by Region 3 of the USDA Forest Service. And municipal governments, NGOs, tribes, and businesses can access funding to support thinning and burning, post-fire restoration, tree planting, small diameter wood utilization, and restoration planning. And these grants are usually 3-year grants and can go out on all land jurisdictions, municipal, county, land grant, state, tribal, and federal lands. They cannot go onto private lands. That's the one caveat. So the Forest Guild in the Southwest has worked with the CFRP program a lot, and I found it to be one of the best funding sources locally to address complex multi-jurisdictional forest issues. Because the Guild is so involved in the program, kind of in the back of my mind for the last several years was a finding from a 2008 analysis that showed that about less than 10% of projects, CFRP projects, had received fire after they were thinned. And so the Community Forest Restoration Act of 2000, which authorizes this, has an objective B to reestablish fire regimes, approximating those that shaped our forests before fire suppression. So it seems like that objective of the program wasn't being used by grantees a lot. This project occurred on state trust lands managed by the New Mexico State Land Office, and it's the fourth Collaborative Forest Restoration Program grant in area. The State Land Office has been an excellent partner to work with, and one of the reasons is that they recognize that they don't have all the resources in-house. And here in the center of the picture is Mark Myers holding the hose at the back of the engine, and he's the forester for the whole state. So the State Land Office has one forester for a lot of area. And so Mark has pursued a strategy of collaboration, leveraging partnerships. And so we continued with that strategy when it came time to return fire to the sites that we had collaboratively thinned. In terms of geography, in the bottom corner, you can see the state of New Mexico, and the area of interest is northern New Mexico, near the Colorado border. When you look at the map, you can see the village of Angel Fire in the north, and the villages of Black Lake and Black Lake Resorts centrally located. The blue shaded areas are New Mexico State Trust lands, and the red circle is the area of focus. The red rectangle near Angel Fire, I drew on the map to just identify that that area is a very dense wildland-urban interface with a lot of homes and second homes. And the homes occur from both kind of the central valley floor near Angel Fire and go up to about 9,500 or 10,000 feet above sea level, and it also includes a ski area. So there are a lot of values at risk in this landscape. So there's a lot of text on this slide, but the main point of it is to show a lot of the steps that had to occur before we could get to using fire on the ground. You can see starting in 2007 there was a lot of planning and thinning, and throughout the last 5 years there's been a lot of capacity building for wood removal. And in 2014 we do plan to return to the site and continue burning and working away at our burn plan. Another slide with lots of text, but the reason for this is to show the diverse group of partners that were engaged to be part of this effort. Everyone had a different role, so what I tried to do is list the entity. After that is a number of people who are part of the prescribed burn operations, and then following that their role. So you can see HRV Hill Small Products was the local thinning operator, and in the summer they're seasonal firefighters, and so they were able to now return fire to an area they already thinned. There were some other key partners like Bandelier National Monument was able to lend the project their prescribed fire gear cache, which had about 20. Was able to outfit 20 people with Nomex, a loaded fire pack, and a hand tool, and that was a huge in-kind donation to the project. Next down the list is the Fire Learning Network, and so throughout the whole project, from proposal stage in the winter of 2012 to when we actually were burning this past fall, Jeremy Bailey from the Nature Conservancy's Fire Learning Network was a huge resource to help us and guide us to get to the point where we could actually burn. I have one partner listed in red, Twin Willows Ranch, and the point of that is just to show that partners from the beginning of a project may not persist to the end of a project. In this case, they were a nearby ranch, and they were worried about the fire risk they were living in. And so the Forest Guild helped train the ranch staff with NWCG qualifications. And as the Guild and the ranch were working on an agreement so that the engine from the ranch could be part of the burn operation, the ranch owners and their lawyers weren't comfortable with doing this, and they fell out. So that was a loss, and it's unfortunate. But there is still a lot of apprehension with engaging with prescribed fire. As you go down the list, you can see your local universities, youth corps, a lot of other university students from around the country were all part of this effort. So zooming in, the green line represents our maximum allowable burn area. The hashed areas denote areas that have received thinning. And this map is actually a little bit out of date. Most of the forested areas within the maximum allowable burn area had received thinning by the time the project occurred, or the first entry of fire occurred. With a 2011 air photo, you can see the site. The multicolored numbered lines denote our holding lines that were established prior to the burn. The creation of those lines was also funded by the CFRP project. And you can see there's about 30% of the site is in meadow and the rest forested with ponderosa pine closest to the meadows and mixed conifer as you get away from the meadows. And here's close to the same map, but the red lines denote where we were able to burn this past fall. And the burn leadership felt that this was strategic to build that block to the west so that future burning could run into that, and we'd have a safer scenario with which to put fire on the ground. So some elements to making an event like this happen. Like I said earlier, guidance from the Fire Alerting Network was really critical, and we wouldn't have been able to do what we did without that. Another was the recognition by the three main entities on the line, which was the State Lands Office, SLO, the Forest Guild is the grantee, and NRG Consulting. They're a local fire management business who was awarded the bid for the burn boss, and so that's Kerry Gregg and Rich Graber. And we all recognized that there was shared liability among us, and that was really helpful into moving forward as we got closer to using fire. We used liability waivers for everyone who was on site. There were waivers for students, volunteers, and professionals, and no one was able to come on site without filling out a waiver. And I think that also built confidence in the operation. Engaging with your local fire departments is always really important. We had support from our 2 local fire departments. You're essentially burning in their backyard, putting up smoke in their backyard, and so it's really important to engage with them. We had a burn plan, which was very useful to accessing the federal funds through the grant, and so having that in hand is also key. And the CFRP grant was able to support the engines that we contracted with to bring them on site, to cover lodging costs for the cadre, stipends for local firefighters who were taking time off of work, and even things like drip torch mix. People had to eat, but federal funds were not used for that. We leveraged other non-federal funds to do that. As those of you who use federal grant funds know, you can't pay for food with those funds. And yes, I can share a copy of the liability waivers afterwards, Lisa. So thanks for that question. And finally, public meetings and communication. Engaging with the people that live near the burn area is really important. So this is just a timeline of tasks in the last year that had to happen before we could burn. Control lines needed to be created. There were MOUs with the Bureau of Land Management and the Village of Angel Fire that needed to get put in place. There was a lot of training that needed to happen. Agreements needed to be put in place, and finally the public meetings before and after the burn, and the meeting after the burn I'll talk about later, occurred on site so people could actually see what the forest looked like afterwards. And so moving into the after-action review part, where I'll kind of go through the different steps of what we did well, what we could do better, and what we learned. I want to, heading into the session, I want to say that everyone involved did an amazing job, and without all the partners' engagement, this wouldn't have happened. Missing any one partner probably would have led us not to put fire on the ground. So what we did well, coordinating with the Moreno Valley Fire Department, the Black Lake Station, and the Angel Fire Department, like I mentioned earlier, is really important. And in the public meeting after the burn, the local fire chief said that he felt that we needed to get communities used to smoke in the air in the fall, and I thought that was a huge success to get that recognition and affirmation from the local fire department. Here's a picture of the local water tender being used on site during our training exchange. There were 6 firefighter Type 2 trainees, and they all left this week, the training exchange week, with full NWCG certifications and a lot of hands-on experience, which is really valuable. In addition to that, there were a lot of longtime firefighters who had never used fire during these shoulder seasons to achieve resource objectives, and so that was a huge success. And on top of that, there were also a lot of people working on task books, firing boss trainees, firefighter Type 1s, so a lot of people made progress towards those elements. Sarah has a question about why we would burn in the fall and not the spring. A lot of the
Oops, Eytan, you just cut out.
Oh, sorry. Am I there?
Yeah, now you're there.
Okay, so I was just going to talk about Sarah's question. Oh, I see Xander says let's catch up to it in the end. So I'll just move on then. And Xander, I'm sure, will remind me to talk about that. So moving on with what we did well, day one of the training exchange was really hectic. We were bringing all different sorts of people from all over the country together, and so we needed to get day one right. We had a lot of classroom training. We had local fire ecologists and fire managers talk about current issues. We also tried to build up the education of everyone through some foundational lectures. And we capped off the day with a communal meal of New Mexico green and red chili enchiladas that you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. And I think that was a good way to start the week. And that was a recommendation from the Jeremy Bailey from the Fire Learning Network to start the week off right, and I think we did that. Another component of this project was engaging with the public and engaging with the press. So this project started receiving press in local and regional papers starting in July. And just a day before the burn started, we had this article on the local Sangre de Cristo Chronicle paper. And the headline, as you can see, is Residents Brace for September 30th Burn. And that is not necessarily the best headline we want. And for those of you whose eyes still work well enough, the second paragraph in the article talks about a landowner who spent $1,200 of their own funds on firefighting equipment and water storage because they thought this was going to burn down their house. So that's how we started the week. And at the end of the week, the headline was Beneficial Blaze, Crews Burn 105 acres and plan to return. So I feel that was a real success, kind of changing the tone in the press. We also received an article in the online news outlet E&E News fighting fire with fire brings both benefits and challenges to New Mexico. So that was nice to have both coverage locally and some coverage nationally. You know, providing controlled burning experience for firefighting professionals. Some of them had never, like I mentioned earlier, burned outside of wildfire season. So this was really important to get them to change that mindset that we have to fight fire sometimes of the year, and then we need to use fire in other times of the year. And one of the goals of the grant was to build capacity in New Mexico so that additional burning can happen. So as part of the burn boss bid process, finding a burn boss, one of the successful bidder, Kerry Gregg here, seen on his ATV, he was upfront and said, "Hey, I don't have a ton of experience burning in ponderosa pine and mixed conifer, but I want more experience. I want to be able to burn in those fuel types." And so this was a little bit of training for him to lead an operation in these fuel types. And I'm happy to say that after this project, he then went on to burn ponderosa pine in another area as well. So that was a huge success. Right here in the picture with Kerry pointing in the picture, he's also talking to our firing boss trainee, Daniel Denapa from Santa Clara Pueblo. So he was another important person on the project. And down in the right-hand corner, we have Linda Santana, who recently won Youth Corps Member of the Year across the whole country, and she was a participant from Rocky Mountain Youth Corps, and she was just a great firefighter Type 2 trainee and learned a lot, and was really happy to have her on the project as well. So moving ahead and what we could do better, we had, like I said, we had training on day one, and then we moved into burn operations on day two, and that kind of left some of the firefighter Type 2 trainees catching up a bit throughout the week. And so integrating some hands-on learning experiences for the FFT2s, if doing this again in the future, I would definitely kind of pepper that training throughout the week. Our safety officer, Fred Schiffler, noted that our lunches that were being prepped for everyone didn't have enough calories, and we were essentially leaving food in the fridge that we could have been putting in brown bags for everyone. And so in the future, we're definitely going to make sure everyone's a little better fed throughout the day. And next is, a lot of our partners were donating their time or were otherwise not being compensated. So burning again under this model, the thought from the leadership team was that we can have people work in shifts, 8 to 10-hour shifts, so that some folks who can't pull 12-hour days, 14-hour days, aren't asked to do so. So hopefully you got the impression from the earlier slides and the timelines. There's a lot of steps that needed to happen before we could put fire on the ground on this site. And one of the things looking back that I wish we did was to pull together the leadership team of the burn a week or two ahead of time to really spend some quality time talking through everyone's expectations and approach, so that when we got to the burn, a lot of those roles would be clarified. And as it happens, we did that during the week, which added a little bit of extra work during the week. So this is all stuff that I think next time around can be addressed. So a really important thing that came from the after-action review was that Herman V. Hill, whose company did all the thinning, recognized that he can be doing different things with the slash on site to mitigate intensity underneath trees. So he realized that he was leaving too much slash near trees, or sometimes the slash wasn't knocked down enough. So he's incorporating this into his current treatments nearby in the next treatment area, which is really nice, and it was really good to have him there to have that local knowledge on site. Next, doing this again, I would definitely pepper trainings specific to the firefighter type 2 trainees, those really fresh people, throughout the week, and not just on day one, so that they leave the week in a really good position to continue on in their fire careers. Another thing learned was that our burn checklist that we used right before we ignited was different from what the Forest Service and BLM use in the area. And after this week and everything settled down, we realized that we need to be using the same notification and checklist as our federal partners for consistency, and so that they can get all the information they want to know from that burn notification as well. Another big lesson learned was that a dedicated PIO or public information officer is needed. During the burn week, we shared that responsibility across a couple positions, and having a dedicated person by a phone and a computer throughout most of the day, but in communication with what's happening on site, is really important. So moving ahead to kind of the learning, something noticed by the burn team, the burn boss, division chief, safety officer, was that the burn plan as it was a little restrictive. We had an upper temperature limit of 65 degrees, and that was irregardless of other factors. So that shut down burning on our two big burn days as temperatures crept up in the afternoon. And the burn team felt that increasing that in the future would allow additional acres to be treated. So one of the downsides of having a lot of those firefighter type 2 trainees and not having the catering some training specific to them throughout the week was that some of our more seasoned fire professionals noticed inefficient tool use and inefficient use of water during mop-up operations along the fire burn area perimeters. So that's something that can definitely be addressed. Another one was every morning preparing the IAPs and maps for all the participants took a little bit longer than probably needed, and so preparing IAPs ahead of time, maybe a week ahead of time, so that they just need a little bit of tweaking the morning of before you press print would probably speed everything along. So we were burning, like I said, in ponderosa pine and in mixed conifer forests with an aspen component. And so burning mixed conifer is a little different than ponderosa pine. It has some mixed severity aspects to that regime, and luckily the burn team we had, the burn boss and the division chief and the firing bosses were adept and comfortable doing this, and I feel like we really mimicked the fire regime well, and there was some individual tree torching and one pocket of mortality, a small pocket, but I feel like that really mimicked what the literature says about mixed conifer fire. So another aspect that I think the burn leadership that was assembled there did really well was that taking advantage of the conditions you have on site. We had different areas, and they had been treated over a period of 5 years. So at some places the slash was 5 years old, and in some places the slash was less than a year old. And so taking advantage of the red slash is really important. Another issue during the week was that we had a lot of rain in early September that was unanticipated, and it essentially made the grass unavailable to carry fire. So using the red slash became our main vehicle to spread fire on the ground. So that's a really important aspect to the complexity of this type of situation. Next was kind of an administrative thing. So the burn plan, in the past, New Mexico State Forestry had signed off on state land office burn plans. And due to kind of changing administrations in the state, New Mexico State Forestry has decided they no longer want to sign off and be an official reviewer of burn plans for the state land office. So the burn plan we had, while good, didn't have that approval. And the project team learned very late that state forestry was not going to look at this burn plan. And luckily, Jeremy Bailey from the Nature Conservancy was there and was able to do it, and we were able to put fire on the ground. But it's really important to kind of know the lay of the land in terms of what partners can fill what roles, and then is there capacity changing? So whereas 3 years ago, State Forestry may have reviewed a burn plan, now they don't, and we learned that very quickly. So for those of you who might be planning your own training exchange or trying to collaboratively pull people together to burn acres, these are some of my thoughts. So I didn't anticipate that developing the agreements between all the partners engaged would take the time it took, but it took more than I thought it would. But it's really valuable that we took the time so that the agreements are right. An agreement for purchasing services for someone to write a fire plan is different than purchasing services for someone to do thinning and logging. And so similarly, when you're hiring a burn boss, it's really important that everyone feels really good about the agreement in place. Not everyone can volunteer time. I feel like the CFRP grant that we are working under, we were able to build in stipends to offset people's costs. And I think that really worked out well, and it brought the right people to the site. And that bullet goes to fundraising. Fundraising is really important. The budget is really important. Fire is generally very cost-effective compared to thinning and mastication, but it still costs money. And if you're kind of burning outside of the federal land structure, where there tend to be a lot of resources on site, the way we were doing, the budget was really important. Making the time to connect to the local fire personnel is another key component. Like I said earlier, we were putting smoke up in their backyard. We were pretty close to houses, so connecting with them has a lot of value. Local fire personnel during the burn days from the local fire departments did patrol in the neighborhoods that were closest, and they did answer questions from homeowners. So that was really, really valuable. Like I mentioned, wildland-urban interface. This was a very big wildland-urban interface for New Mexico. There are a lot of very high-value homes in Angel Fire, and having those people come to the public meeting and get a chance to ask their questions and to hear responses and to hear what the fire professionals have to say is really important. But the Forest Guild also invested a lot to make those meetings successful. We had a lot of staff there and a lot of preparation ahead of time and afterwards. And finally, the connecting with the press and sticking with it was really important, and I think really changed the story in the public discourse locally about what we were doing, and hopefully that will pay off next fall as we return to continue working on that burn plan. So I see there are already some questions. Xander, do you have any thoughts before I start talking more?
Well, no, thank you very much for the presentation, and I think we'll jump right into Sarah King's question about timing of the burn, and then I'll go ahead and open up the phone line so you can just voice your questions over the line, or you can continue to type them in the chat window.
Sure. So, for Sarah's question, while the ecology says a lot of fires pre-suppression occurred in the spring, there's a real hesitancy in this fuel type, and given the weather patterns to use fire in the spring to mimic the exact season of burns, because of the potential for a lot of red flag days to occur between when your burn could potentially be done and when the next moisture comes in our area. This past year, we didn't have any moisture from about February through July, so there's a lot of risk with burning in the spring, whereas in the fall, the moisture is more regular, the temperatures are down, and the RH is up, so fire managers are happier to burn in the fall, seems like.
And we got a couple other questions coming in, so we'll continue with these in the chat window. Eytan, do you want to talk a little bit more about red slash?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Nina. So, the red slash is the logging residue, the thinning residue that was remaining on site. It's also called the activity fuels. And so, as the needles of the ponderosa pine, white fir, Doug fir cure out, they turn red, and they're pretty volatile in terms of they're very receptive to ignitions there. So that is there was variability across the site. Some areas had no red slash, and some areas that were recently thinned had a lot of red slash.
Great.
Then,
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to just say that the red slash was about a year old or less, to address Alan's question.
Great, and I'll go ahead and unmute the line. So we should be able to hear participants if you want to ask Eytan more questions.
Eytan, this is Barb. I'm just curious, was it lopped and scattered, or were there piles for the slash?
Yeah, so it was lopped and scattered. So
okay.
Their piling was not part of the prescription. There was a lot of talk during the week, if this area was piled, we'd be able to do different things. But the slash was patchy in some areas and continuous in others.
Hi, Eytan. This is Porfirio. I was just curious. It's a 900-acre project, or are you did 100 acres or so? What's the plan for the remaining portion of that project?
Yeah, thanks for joining in, Porfirio. So the 900 acres is the maximum allowable burn area. The CFRP grant proposal talked about 700 to 800 acres and of treatment. Because the grass was unavailable this last fall, some of the easiest acres, thanks, Xander, for scrolling back to the air photo, some of the easiest acres weren't able to be tackled. But the CFRP grant was a one-year grant, or 1.5-year grant, and we're working with our partners in the State Land Office to try to return this fall. And there's already a commitment from the Fire Learning Network to bring another nearby training exchange that they're managing onto this site for about 4 days to help out. So that would be 20 firefighters available this fall to help out. So I think we're definitely going to try to take advantage of that opportunity. And I should add that the burn boss and our division chief from Energy Consulting feel that now that the western flank is a little better protected because of the treatments we did this past fall, they're going to be able to increase the acres this upcoming fall. So I'm staying positive that we're going to come closer to our acreage objectives.
Eytan, this is Barb again. Sorry to hog the line. The Arizona Prescribed Fire Council is going to try to do a TREX this fall somewhere around Flagstaff as well. And you had CFRP funding. You may have said this when you talked about your partners, but I missed it, whether anyone else contributed funds besides in-kind. I know there was a lot of in-kind contribution.
Yeah, so I'm kind of drawing a blank, Barb, on some contributions. There were some participants who paid a fee to attend. I'd say probably 85% of participants received a stipend. So one way to fundraise is to try to cover your own costs with the people who are attending. We did receive a small donation from Enterprise Rent-A-Car that helps with our catered meal the first night. But a lot of the contributions were in kind.
Other questions out there? Well, if there aren't any other questions, maybe we'll let people go. I do want to remind everyone about the survey. I've just put up a link if you're dropping off earlier or want to jump onto it immediately. And I also want to thank Eytan. It's a great presentation, and I was a participant in this project, and it's really nice to kind of see the overall summary, and I think some of those lessons learned are really valuable, and I hope Barb, you and the other folks involved in the Arizona Prescribed Fire Council can take advantage of some of these. So with that, we'll go ahead and close off the webinar. And if you have further questions or comments, I'm sure you can follow up with Eytan or with Barb or myself. And thank you all for participating.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eytan and Xander.